Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of the Nighthawk Newscast. I'm Noah, and today I'm joined once again by my friend Margery. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
I
Thank you
am.
for having me.
I'm fantastic. My pleasure. And today, in the last episode, we discussed civil rights leaders and the founding fathers. In this one, we're going to be discussing something a little more recent, I would say, a little more trivial as well. We're going to be discussing the violent video game debate, where people try to link people playing violent video games to violent behavior. So, Margery, have you ever played violent video games before, or have you played video games in general? What kind do you play?
Yes, I have, and I kind of still do. I don't really have the time for it anymore, but I will still play. And I'll play like Call of Duty, Black Ops, or Grand Theft Auto. And those video games do have a lot of violence in them,
They
I
do,
have to say.
absolutely. But did you ever feel when you were playing these games like you wanted to actually go out and kill somebody just because you were playing these games? Or is that a far-fetched statement?
That is honestly a far-fetched statement. I never would have thought to go out and kill somebody because my video game player went to go kill somebody for robbing a bank or stealing a car.
Okay, see, it's interesting that you say that because this is actually a very popular belief that people who play these violent video games are more prone to be violent in real life. When we've had like these unfortunate recent mass shootings, even President Trump has said that these violent video games can have a big impact on this. Do you think they can have an impact in some cases, or do you think this is a bit extreme?
Um, Honestly, I think it's a bit extreme because there can be many other factors that lead to it to being
Right.
violent, and I can't see video games being one of them.
Well, I agree with you, and we'll talk about the other factors later, but one thing about this debate that I find interesting is that the media is actually, obviously, we know the media isn't always unbiased, but I found evidence that the media is actually pretty agenda driven in this debate. Like, the research that links these video games to violence, they've actually been found to usually be lower quality than studies that don't. But the media is more likely to cite these studies that say that video games can cause violence. I know the reason, but could you think of maybe why you think the media does this?
Um, Honestly, that's a hard question because there could be many reasons why. One reason could probably be that they're getting attention, that they are pointing towards people because the younger generation is seen as more immature and more, I would say, brought back to video games. That's all they really focus on. And I mean, I could see that just because many people I know spend their time playing video games instead of enjoying the life that they have. Instead, they're sitting in front of a computer or a TV. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that because video games are fun to play. And I'm a girl, and I enjoy playing video games because it's one thing to get my mind off things if I'm bothered by something. And I just think the media targets people to get more attention.
I agree, and you actually mentioned something very interesting, and you actually mentioned something that actually exists. It's called the Goldilocks effect, where the older generation doesn't like change. So, for example, in this case, the media or older people, they're uncomfortable with the idea of these video games because they didn't grow up with them and they see them as strange. So, I think a part of this is the media isn't exactly used to how popular these video games have become, and it makes them feel uncomfortable. So, they try to label them in a negative light, if you will.
I can see that, honestly. Because the younger generation, we get introduced to new things that we never heard of or seen, and we're just like, ooh, that sounds interesting, let me try it. But the older generation, they feel like since they didn't grow up with that, they think it's not normal for kids to be playing that stuff. But we never knew any life without technology, so it's new to us, and we like to experience things. And the older generation just sees life as not having technology, and I feel like that's a big factor as well.
I agree. And I mean, you can't really blame them because, you know, they had their own things that they grew up with. But this is nothing new. I mean, video games are just a recent example. You know, when rock music and heavy metal music first came out and stuff like that, they got blamed for, you know, Satanism and murder all the time. So these scapegoats are really nothing new, you know.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, another thing I found interesting is that, you know, you mentioned that maybe sometimes these tactics are maybe used to like scare people, like the older generation is scared by these inventions.
Yeah.
There's actually a term for this. It's called the moral panic, and the media uses this. It's basically designed to make people fear what is unknown to them. So in this case, they paint these video games as, oh, they make people murder people. They're horrible. You shouldn't play these video games. And they do this to incite fear in the public, not only in the video games themselves, but also the violence themselves. So, in other words, you don't want to go out and kill someone, you should avoid these video games. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, it's definitely a very. I understand where they're coming from, because I'm sure in some cases, if you play video games 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you might go crazy and, you know, might go off the edge. But these are very minor cases. In reality, playing video games is just a normal hobby like reading or writing or art.
I totally agree with you because they are technically a hobby. People enjoy doing them when, say, like you get home, you do your homework, and you're just like, man, I just want to relax and play a video game. And it's time consuming, and it mellows out your hard day you went through and stuff. In
I,
my opinion.
I agree, and obviously I chose this topic because I play a lot of video games. It's probably what I spend like 90% of my free time on, and it's never crossed my mind to, you know, go out and just get an AK-47 and shoot up people. So I've always found this debate a little, should I say, insulting to those who play video games, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Alright. Well, one final question to lead off that. Like I said, I think it's a bit misleading to blame video games. So, in your opinion, what might be other factors that, you know, probably lead to these mass events of violence that people overlook when they mention these video games?
You know, Noah, I'm totally glad you asked me that question because I think one big factor of these mass shootings that are going on, well, two big factors is one, mental health, because you never know if you're diagnosed with something until you actually go to the doctor. And some people just don't go to the doctor and they have all these symptoms and signs, and many parents just overlook it because in my opinion, today's generation, parents don't pay that much attention to their kids as they should. And I think that's a big factor because you never know what your kid's going through. And if you don't take them to the doctor to see if there's something wrong with them, then they're dealing with that their own way without having any medications to balance out their moods and stuff. And I think another factor is guns. For the longest time, you were able to buy like a rifle or a shotgun from Walmart at the age of 18. And you weren't getting background checks, or they weren't checking to see if you have any mental health problems or anything. They were just giving them to the kids and stuff. And I think that's another big factor that comes along with it.
Well, you know, Margie, I agree completely with what you said. In fact, those are two factors I've actually mentioned a lot in my research. Um, Along with, obviously, if someone has like a poor home life, like if they were abused, they're going to be prone to probably be more violent. Or if they were bullied growing up, or they were neglected, these are also other factors that could contribute. But I think that the guns and obviously the mental health, like you mentioned, I'd say these are the two most important. And
Yeah.
it's a bit insulting, in my opinion, at least, to those types of people who suffer from mental health, to blame video games for it. You know, it really takes away from the issue at hand.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what you said when it comes to neglect and how they were how kids were raised in their house and stuff. Because honestly, I didn't even think about that. I was like aiming towards more of mental health just because of the experience that has been on the news and stuff. But people also don't look at the households. Like if a kid is grown up with in a violent household, that's all they know is violence. So they don't know right from wrong in that situation.
Absolutely, and these people may use video games as an outlet to get away from that. And then if they do something violent, for example, someone might blame the video games, when in reality it was just how they were raised. You know.
Yeah, totally agree with that statement.
Well, that's about all I have, unless you have any final comments about the debate.
Um, Not really. I'm very happy you chose me to answer these questions because this topic is very interesting and I never really thought of any other factors. I never even thought that people would think that video games are the reason why people are causing violence, honestly.
I
So
know.
I thank you for informing me of all the information because it's really interesting.
Absolutely, absolutely. It definitely is a lot more popular of an opinion than I thought it would be, but there are definitely other factors that are more liable to lead to violence or aggression than video games. 100%.
Yeah.
So, everybody, that's about it. In summary, we don't think violent video games cause violent behavior. Um, that's about all I have for episode 2 of the Nighthawk Newscast. So, do you have any last words, Margery?
I just want to say y'all have a good day, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of Violent Video Games. And I enjoy experiencing this with everybody and actually being able to ask and answer the questions that Noah had asked me. So thank you so much, Noah. And I
Absolutely.
just, y'all have a good night.
Goodbye, everybody.